Hello YouTubers, Zed Eldred here. Today I want to talk about our seat posts that we use and the different issues we have with some of them seizing in the frame, and if you haven't experienced it, this will help you prevent it from happening because it can be a pain. One of the subscribers on the channel here, Barry, suggested that I do the video and talk about galvanic corrosion between carbon fiber seat posts and aluminum frames, and I decided to just do that in addition to the rest of the issues and just talk about pros and cons and how you can prevent them. So what I want to do is, I don't have a carbon fiber seat post that's freestanding. The one I have is on my bike, so I'll get to that in a little bit. This is an alloy seat post that I use. It actually works on a steel bike, but I like the look of the carbon, so I put that on there. And what I wanted to talk about today was just take this approach and start talking about, first of all, if you notice on my bikes, I've got tape. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me bring this frame over here. I don't want to move the camera right now. If you look on this seat post here, this is a Thompson seat post, alloy, and I've got a tape right there. Okay, the reason I have a tape is twofold. I don't let my seat post stay in the frame forever and ever. I mean, periodically, it might be a year or a year and a half. I mean, it really depends on how much, you ride in the rain or whatever. But for the most part, when I put a seat post in any frame, and I'll get to the carbon in a little bit. This is an alloy. I put a thin layer of grease on here. And what that does is it gives you kind of a buffer between the two materials. For the most part with this alloy, you're not going to get it to seize in, let's say, a steel frame or even a carbon frame, because you'd have to leave it there for a very long period of time without taking it out, say once a year or so forth, and putting another thin film of grease on there. But what Barry was talking about is the carbon fiber seat posts in particular with aluminum frames have a galvanization that occurs. It's a different kind of corrosion between those two materials. The carbon fiber does not work very well in direct contact with aluminum. So some builders like Calfee, I owned a Calfee carbon frame years ago. Calfee is one of the few builders that actually puts like a 0.005, a thin layer of fiber, almost like fiberglass in a way, between the carbon seat post. He actually puts it on his post that he makes, or puts it in his frame sometimes. And that's one of the few people that does that. You could probably even put a piece of paper or something. The key with carbon fiber seat posts and aluminum is that the clear coat that makes the carbon fiber seat post real pretty also reacts to solvents, and it reacts to grease. So if you take a pretty carbon fiber seat post and put a thin layer of grease on there and stick it in an aluminum frame, and you don't periodically take it out and grease it, that bad boy will seize in there, and you'd have to probably take it to a machine shop if you don't end up losing your frame. I mean, that's how bad it is. So the prevention is frequent. If you ride in the rain and you've got carbon fiber seat posts in an aluminum frame and you do a rainy ride, take it out and re-grease it. Or if you can, strip that clear coat. Carbon fiber does not need clear coat on it. The material itself is pretty. I mean, there are people that get a carbon bike with no clear coat and it looks great. So you don't need it on there. So really, if you're going to put a carbon fiber seat post in an aluminum frame, the first thing I would do is get the clear coat off of there, and then get some thin fiber to put between the post and the aluminum, and then you won't need. But another thing you could use is this aluminum anti-seize. I use this on every frame that I build. I use it because the cups, like my frame here, all my frames have Campagnolo Ultra Torque, and they come with cups. And those cups are aluminum. And whether you're putting the aluminum in a steel frame or in a titanium frame, it's better. I use anti-seize because I put those things in there and I don't take them out to re-grease them or do whatever. So I use anti-seize so that it's a one-time. I torque it to 35 Newton meters and I'm done. Because really, when the cups don't need to be serviced, it's the bearings that need to be serviced. The cups, I consider them to be part of the frame once they're in place. Because if you keep taking them out often to re-grease them or whatever, they end up getting squeaky over time and you got to get new ones. Because, aluminum is not a very tough material. It does fatigue, Think about it the next time you get on an airplane. Yeah, aluminum fatigues. So, anti-seize, grease, whatever. But if you're going to use the application that Barry wanted me to talk about, if you specifically, you love your carbon seat post and you want to put it in your aluminum frame, you got to do two things. Strip that clear coat. You won't hurt the carbon. You can probably use Zep or a lot of things you can use on a rag. You don't want to soak your post, and you can get that clear coat if it has clear coat on it. Get it off of there, and then you can use grease if you want. But if you do use grease, tape it like I showed you on my bike. Tape your position so that you can frequently, say every 3 months, 6 months, take it out, re-grease it, put it back. You won't have the problems, because when it does seize, it can literally ruin your frame because it's not easy. It's not a DIY. You may have to go to a machine shop. So keep that in mind. Now, for other seat posts, I've got a Thompson seat post on this bike. Thompson makes great seat posts. I really like it. They're not the lightest, but they're easy to use. They got 2 bolts. They're solid. No squeaks, no nothing. All I do on this is I put grease on there. This is a steel frame, and this is a Thompson alloy seat post. I put grease on there. I put it in there. Maybe once every year or 18 months, I may take it out and just put a new layer of grease. But I've never had a problem with seizures between steel and the alloy seat post. So it's not that big. But just because I haven't had the problem doesn't mean it can't happen. If you keep your bikes outside, and it depends on the condition, how you use your bikes. If you just let it go for a long time without really servicing it, yeah, you can have that problem between any kind of metals. Titanium is not so bad. If you're using a carbon seat post in a tie frame, you really want to use those little, they call them, there's like a paste, like a carbon paste, so that it doesn't slip. Because sometimes if you grease carbon, it slips, and then you end up continuing to tighten, and then pop, you can pop it. So use the paste. For tie, you're not going to have that corrosion. So this galvanic corrosion I'm talking about occurs specifically between carbon fiber and aluminum. And we've known that, not that specific one, oxidation of aluminum is a problem. And that's why even the aluminum cups on my steel frame and my titanium frame, I have the anti-seize on there. You get them and Campy says use Loctite and all this kind of stuff. No, I put anti-seize on there and then I torque it. Because anti-seize has a lot of little materials in there. It's kind of, I'll show you here. Let me take it out. It's not grease. It's almost like it's like you're putting another metal between the seat post and your bike, or the bottom bracket, whatever you put this on. I use anti-seize wherever I don't want things to become permanently affixed. I don't use anti-seize on seat posts because it's not an issue between steel and the alloy. I use a nice layer of grease on there and put it in there. I don't have any problems. All my steel frames are coated on the inside with what they call frame saver, so I don't get internal rust in there. And that kind of makes a difference. And nowadays, the new steel, the insides are fairly well coated. So your seat posts need to have, it doesn't matter whether you're using carbon, aluminum, whatever. Put a little bit of grease on your seat post, put it in your bike. Tape your position so that you don't hesitate taking it out, say every year when you do your service, and clean it and put another layer of grease and then put it back. That's it. Because other than that, you don't really need to do a whole lot. But if you're tied to a carbon seat post and you want to put in an aluminum bike, it needs extra care. You need to take it out at least every 6 months and make sure, if you're just using grease. But if you're putting like a thin layer of fiberglass that like Calfee does in his frames, to make sure basically what you're doing is you're keeping the carbon fiber from touching the aluminum. Some people have put paper around it, and they said it worked for them because you're just keeping the metals apart. But I think if you are using grease and you don't let it stay there for 5 years or 3 years outside in the rain and all of that, I don't think you're going to have that much of a problem. But it is an issue when you use that. So on all seat posts, I put a layer of grease. I put it in there, and about once a year, I just unscrew the binder bolt, clean it, put another layer of grease, and put it back in. And most of the time I look at it, the grease is fine when I do it, but I just do that once a year. Especially if I ride the bike in the rain a lot, I will do that. But you know, you need to do that because it's for peace of mind. It's a few minutes of, you know, just putting grease on the thing and putting it back in there so you don't have to worry about it seizing. But if you're other parts of your bike, anytime you use little bolts, put a little bit of grease on there, you know, because we're outside in the elements, you get water, the grease keeps water ingress out, especially your seat, your bottle cages, all of that. Put a little bit of grease on there, you know. So post your comments and questions below. I just wanted to quickly cover this because, you know, Barry had suggested it and it was kind of on my mind, and it related to how I think when I build my bikes, and that's why all my bikes have tape on the saddle position. Even this seat post that I don't have on my steel bike currently, the tape that I use is still there. I put a little piece of tape on the back. So I just chose to swap it out with the carbon because I like the way the carbon look, but this seat post is set at my saddle height for that frame. So if the carbon seat post on that frame was to mess up, I would just put this one on there. And yes, I have a carbon seat post on a steel frame. There is no history of galvanic corrosion between carbon and steel, but I still coated that carbon seat post with a thin layer of grease and put that in that steel frame. And I treat it the same way. Once a year, I pull it out, re-lube it, but steel will not react to that like aluminum does. For some reason, those two, they just have a history. So I just wanted to briefly cover that. And I hope that, Barry, this is what you kind of had in mind. You know, post your comments and questions, and whatever specific questions you have, I can answer in the comments. But I wanted to just do this video for that. Be safe out there, guys, and keep riding.